The first light of morning did not so much arrive as it seeped into the small apartment, a weak, gray watercolor wash that painted the walls in shades of resignation. It was a silence that Alex knew intimately. It wasn't an empty silence. It was heavy, filled with the ghosts of unspoken words and the echoes of a life that had been snatched away. He swung his legs out of bed, the familiar ache in his lower back a dull reminder of his 40 years, 6 of which felt like a lifetime. He moved through the quiet space with a practiced economy of motion, his footsteps soft on the worn floorboards. He didn't need the light. He could navigate this world in the dark. He pushed open his son's door, the faint creak of its hinges the only sound to disturb the peace. There, in the dim light, was Leo. 10 years old, his face relaxed in sleep, a map of innocence. For a moment, Alex just watched him, his heart clenching with a love so fierce it was almost painful. This boy was his anchor, his purpose, his everything. "Hey, buddy," Alex whispered, his voice a low rumble. "Time to get up." Leo's eyes fluttered open, and a slow, trusting smile spread across his face. There was no need for more words. The routine began, a silent ballet they had perfected over 2,190 mornings. Alex slid his arms under Leo's frail body, one arm supporting his back, the other under his knees, and lifted. The motion was fluid, a testament to years of repetition, a fusion of strength and infinite tenderness. He gently lowered his son into the waiting wheelchair, the clicks of the footrests locking into place, serving as their morning's first conversation. In the kitchen, the ritual continued. Cereal poured, milk just so, a spoon placed in Leo's waiting hand. They ate facing each other across the small wooden table, the only sounds the scrape of spoon against ceramic. An outsider might have seen sadness in the quiet, but for them, it was a language. A shared glance when a bird landed on the fire escape, a faint smile from Alex when Leo got a milk mustache, a nod of thanks from Leo when Alex wiped it away. Their love was a fortress, but Alex knew, in the deepest parts of his soul, that it was also a prison of two. The apartment was tidy, but it held the sterile air of a place where life was managed, not fully lived. On the mantelpiece, a single, dust-free frame held a photo of a woman with a brilliant smile, forever caught in a moment of pure joy. Alex hadn't looked directly at it in years. Later, long after Leo was asleep, the silence returned, but now it was different. It was accusatory. It was lonely. Alex sat on the couch, the glow of his phone casting a pale, bluish light on his weary face. He was scrolling, his thumb flicking past a gallery of smiling strangers. It was a hollow exercise he'd started and stopped a dozen times. Then he paused. A profile picture of a woman named Clara. She wasn't posing or pouting. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her eyes crinkled at the corners. It was authentic. A dangerous flicker of hope ignited in his chest, only to be immediately doused by a cold wave of guilt. 6 years. 6 years since the screech of tires had become the soundtrack to his life. 6 years since he'd earned this penance. His thumb hovered over the message icon, a tiny digital button that felt as heavy as a tombstone. To press it would be to admit that the life he shared with Leo wasn't enough. To not press it would be to accept that this suffocating silence was all he deserved. For 3 straight nights, the routine was the same. Alex would open the app, navigate to Clara's profile, and simply stare. Her laughing face became a symbol of a world he wasn't allowed to enter. Each time, his thumb would hover, paralyzed by a familiar, crushing thought. Anna is gone because of you. Leo is in that chair because of you. A life of quiet service is the only apology you can offer. It was a penance he had accepted, a sentence he served every single day. To seek joy for himself felt like a gross betrayal, a selfish stain on the sacred memory of what he had lost. He wasn't just a single father. He was a penitent, and his quiet suffering was his daily prayer. The change came, as it often does, not from a grand epiphany, but from a small, devastatingly honest observation. It was a Thursday evening. Alex was helping Leo with his homework, leaning over the table to point out a detail in a science textbook. He was smiling, explaining the water cycle with the same patient energy he brought to every task. Leo was quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed as he studied his father's face. Then, he looked up, his gaze clear and serious. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. You're always smiling at me," Leo said, his small voice cutting through the silence of the apartment. "But your eyes look sad when you think I'm not looking." The words struck Alex with the force of a physical blow. He froze, the smile melting from his face. He had spent 6 years building a fortress around his son, shielding him from every hardship. But he had never realized that the deepest sadness was radiating from him, seeping through the very walls he had built. He thought his silent grief was a shield for Leo. He saw now it was a shadow, and his son was living in it. That night, there was no hesitation. The guilt was still there, a low thrum beneath his ribs, but it was joined by a new, more powerful feeling, a desperate need to let the light in for his son. He sat on the couch, opened the app, and typed before he could talk himself out of it that, "Hi Clara, my name's Alex. You have a lovely smile." His heart hammered against his chest. A few minutes later, 3 dots appeared. "She's typing. Thanks, Alex. I'm Clara. I like your profile. You look like a kind person." They exchanged a few more messages, simple and warm. But the great, unbreachable wall stood before him. He took a deep breath, his fingers trembling slightly as he typed the truth that, "I should let you know. If we were to meet, I'd be bringing my son with me. He's 10, he's amazing, and he's in a wheelchair." He hit send, and his stomach plummeted. This was it. The polite excuse. "Oh, that's complicated right now." He watched the screen, bracing for the gentle rejection. The 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. The silence stretched for an eternity. He felt the familiar cold dread creeping back in. Then, a message buzzed through. "I wouldn't have it any other way. How about the little cafe by the park on Saturday?" Alex read the words once, then twice. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding since the day of the accident. It wasn't pity. It wasn't hesitation. It was acceptance, pure and simple, and in the quiet of his lonely apartment. A single tear traced a path down his face, not of sadness, but of a fragile, terrifying hope. Saturday dawned bright and painfully clear, the kind of cheerful, sun-drenched morning that felt like a mockery of Alex's churning anxiety. The hours leading up to their 1 o'clock meeting stretched into an eternity. Alex found himself pacing the small apartment, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He laid out 3 different shirts for himself before settling on a simple, gray one, hoping it would make him invisible. For Leo, however, he chose the brightest thing in his closet, a brilliant blue t-shirt with a cartoon rocket ship soaring across the chest. As he buttoned his son's shirt, he noticed his own hands were trembling. The walk to the cafe was only 4 blocks, but it felt like a pilgrimage across a hostile landscape. Alex's senses were on high alert, his mind a frantic scanner for potential threats. Every crack in the sidewalk was a chasm. The rumble of a passing bus felt like a roar of judgment. He felt the weight of every gaze from passers-by, real or imagined. A woman with a stroller gave them a wide berth, her eyes lingering for a fraction of a second on Leo's chair, and Alex's jaw tightened. He imagined pity in her eyes, the same soft, sad look he'd come to despise. He was a bodyguard for his son's dignity, his shoulders squared against a world he was sure was ready to wound them. But Leo saw none of it. This was the strange, beautiful, and heartbreaking contrast of their lives. While Alex navigated a minefield of perceived slights, Leo charted a course through a world of wonders. "Dad, look, that dog has 2 different colored eyes," he exclaimed, pointing a small finger. A moment later, "That cloud looks like a giant turtle." Leo was living in the vibrant, immediate present, while Alex was trapped in a future that hadn't even happened yet, bracing for an impact he was certain was coming. Each of Leo's joyful observations was a small, sharp pang in Alex's chest, a reminder of the innocence he was so desperate to protect. They arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. The cheerful chatter from within spilled out onto the street, a wave of normalcy that felt alien. Alex pushed the door open, the little bell above it announcing their entry like a starting pistol. He guided Leo to a corner table, one that offered a little privacy but didn't feel like they were hiding. He meticulously positioned the wheelchair, making sure Leo had a good view of the room, fussing with its angle, trying to make it seem like a natural part of the scenery and not the glaring centerpiece he felt it was. He straightened Leo's collar, smoothed his hair, and gave the armrest a final, pointless wipe, he sat down opposite his son, his own posture rigid. He folded his hands on the table, then unfolded them. He checked his watch, 12:51. He looked toward the large front window, his eyes scanning the sidewalk. Any second now, a woman matching Clara's photo would walk by, slow down, peer inside, and her smile would falter. He could see it as clearly as if it were a memory. She would see the wheelchair, the complication, the whole messy picture. And she would hesitate. Then, with a flicker of polite regret, she would turn and walk away. Alex braced himself, steeling his heart for the familiar sting of disappointment. It was, he thought, for the best. It was safer this way. He fixed his gaze on the door, a soldier in a trench, waiting for the inevitable. It was 12:58. Alex's heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of his ribs. His palms were damp. He had already composed the text message he would send to his sister later. It didn't work out. Just like I thought. He was rehearsing the quiet disappointment, preparing to retreat back into the familiar, safe confines of his solitude. Then, through the sunlit glass of the cafe window, a figure appeared. It was her, Clara. In person, she was softer than her photo, with an unassuming grace in the way she moved. She pushed the door open, and the little bell chimed, a sound that seemed to make the entire room hold its breath. Her eyes, warm and searching, scanned the crowded space. Alex felt a powerful urge to shrink, to disappear, to shield Leo from the inevitable moment her gaze would land on them and falter. Her eyes swept past a laughing couple, a family with a toddler, and then they found him. Their gazes met for a fleeting second, and Alex's entire body tensed. This is it, he thought. The moment of truth. A smile bloomed on her face. It wasn't the tight, polite smile of pity he knew so well. It was genuine, radiating a warmth that seemed to travel across the room and touch him directly. It was a smile that said, "There you are?" But what happened next shattered Alex's carefully constructed reality into 1,000 pieces. She didn't walk towards him. Her path diverged, bypassing the empty chair that waited for her opposite Alex. With a grace and purpose that seemed to quiet the air around her, she walked directly to Leo's side of the table. She didn't hover over him or speak down to him. Instead, she did something that stopped Alex's heart. She knelt. She gracefully folded to one knee, her dress pooling slightly on the floor, bringing herself completely and utterly to Leo's eye level. The world of adults talking over his head, of fleeting glances and awkward pats on the shoulder, vanished. In that moment, she had entered his world. "You must be Leo," she said, her voice even softer and warmer than he'd imagined. "I'm Clara." Leo, stunned into silence, simply stared, his eyes wide with surprise. "I brought this for you," Clara continued, and from her simple canvas tote bag, she pulled out a single, perfect sunflower. It was a magnificent thing, its face a brilliant explosion of yellow, open and unapologetically bright. It was a small sun in the palm of her hand. She didn't offer it to Alex to pass along. She didn't ask permission. With a gentle hand, she placed the thick, sturdy stem directly into Leo's small, waiting fingers. The gesture was so simple, so profound, it felt like a seismic event. She saw the boy, not the chair. She saw the center of Alex's universe, not the obstacle to getting to him. Leo looked down at the vibrant flower in his hand, his mouth slightly agape. He touched one of the soft petals with his fingertip, a look of pure, unadulterated wonder on his face. Alex watched, frozen. He was no longer a participant, but a spectator to an act of grace so pure it felt sacred. The armor of cynicism and fear he had worn for 6 years didn't just crack, it disintegrated. It fell away in an instant, leaving him utterly exposed and breathless. The bitterness, the defensiveness, the constant, exhausting vigilance, it all dissolved under the gentle weight of a single sunflower. Only then, after the gift was given and Leo was beaming, did Clara finally lift her gaze to meet Alex's. Her smile was still there, but now it was an invitation, a question, and a statement all at once. And as he looked back at her, a man stripped of all his defenses, Alex felt something he thought had died in him forever, a profound and unconditional hope. As Clara finally took her seat opposite him, Alex felt like he was surfacing from underwater. The muffled sounds of the cafe sharpened back into focus, but the world felt entirely new. The crushing anxiety that had been his constant companion was gone, replaced by a light, buzzing sense of disbelief. He had braced himself for an interview, for a delicate negotiation of circumstances. What he got instead was a conversation that felt as easy as breathing. "I think sunflowers are the happiest flowers, don't you?" Clara said, her eyes twinkling as she looked at Leo, who was now holding his flower like a royal scepter. Leo nodded enthusiastically. "It looks like the sun." "Exactly," she said, her smile widening. "It's like holding a little piece of sunshine." And just like that, the floodgates opened. The conversation wasn't a stilted back and forth between two nervous adults. It was a warm, flowing triangle that effortlessly included all three of them. Clara possessed a natural gift for it. She didn't just tolerate Leo's presence, she celebrated it. She turned to him with genuine curiosity, her questions specific and real. "So, that's a rocket ship on your shirt," she began, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Does that mean you're planning on being an astronaut, or are you just a fan of fast travel?" Leo giggled. "An astronaut. I want to float." "Floating is the best," she agreed seriously. "No traffic jams up there." When the waiter came, Clara insisted they all get hot chocolates, asking Leo if he wanted extra whipped cream and marshmallows as if it were the most important decision of the day. When she turned her attention to Alex, asking about his work as a graphic designer, the questions were still interwoven with his life as a father. "Do you ever design things just for fun?" she asked. Then, glancing at Leo, she added, "Does he draw cool superheroes for you? I bet he's a great artist." For the first time in years, Alex felt the tight knot of vigilance in his shoulders begin to loosen. He realized, with a jolt, that he had stopped scanning the room. The other patrons, the potential judging eyes, had all faded into an indistinct, unimportant blur. His entire world had narrowed to this small table, to the woman with the impossibly kind eyes and the sound of his son's voice, clear and confident. He wasn't just answering questions about his job. He was sharing his life, and she was receiving it not as a collection of tragic circumstances, but as a story worth hearing. The true moment of revelation came when Leo told a joke, a silly, nonsensical joke about a talking squirrel that only a 10-year-old would find hilarious. Clara laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. And in response, Leo let out a laugh that Alex hadn't heard in years. It wasn't his quiet, polite chuckle. It was a full, uninhibited, belly-deep laugh that echoed with pure, uncomplicated joy. The sound hit Alex straight in the chest. It was the sound of a boy who felt seen, safe, and utterly happy. He watched Clara, who was now engaged in a serious debate with Leo about whether Batman could beat Spider-Man, and a profound sense of peace settled over him. This wasn't a date. It was something more. It was a glimpse of a life he thought was impossible, a life where his past and present could coexist not as a burden, but simply as a fact. A life where three people could sit around a table and feel, for a little while, like they were whole. The hot chocolates had arrived, miniature mountains of whipped cream and marshmallows that made Leo's eyes widen with delight. Laughter was still echoing at their small table, a warm, foreign sound in Alex's life. He was watching Clara explain to Leo why a platypus is the world's most confused animal, and he felt a lightness in his chest, a buoyant feeling he couldn't remember ever having. For a fleeting, miraculous moment, he wasn't a widower or a caregiver. He was just a man, sharing a happy afternoon with his son and a woman who felt like sunshine. And then, the music changed at a soft, acoustic melody began to drift from the cafe speakers, a gentle guitar riff paired with a haunting female vocal. It was a popular song from about 7 years ago, the kind of pleasant, inoffensive tune that normally fades into the background. But for Alex, it was a thunderclap. His smile froze on his face, a brittle mask that cracked and fell away. The warmth drained from his expression, replaced by a stark, hollow look. The cheerful buzz of the cafe receded, the sound funneling down a long tunnel until it was a distant hum. Clara's voice, mid-sentence, became a muffled murmur. Leo's happy face blurred at the edges. The only thing that was clear and sharp was the song. The worn vinyl of the cafe booth became the familiar fabric of a car seat. The scent of coffee and chocolate was replaced by the smell of pine air freshener and the faint, sweet perfume of his wife, Anna. The memory slammed into him without warning. It was a rainy Tuesday. The same soft melody was playing on the car radio, a gentle soundtrack to a perfect, ordinary moment. Anna was in the passenger seat, laughing at a joke he'd just made, her head thrown back and her hand resting on his. On the gear shift, the late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, and it caught in her hair, turning it into a halo of gold. He remembered thinking, in that exact second, that he had never known a happiness so complete he'd looked away from the road. Just for a moment, just long enough to look at her, to etch the sight of her unrestrained joy into his memory. Just long enough to say, "I love you." And that's when he saw them. The blinding, twin suns of headlights swerving into their lane. The gut-wrenching, violent screech of tires desperately trying to find purchase on wet asphalt. The world became a storm of shattering glass and the horrific, final sound of crunching metal, then silence. A deafening, ringing silence, broken only by the tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine and the soft, maddeningly cheerful melody still playing from a single, unbroken speaker. The dashboard clock was frozen at 6:14 p.m., and beside him, where laughter had been moments before, there was only a stillness that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Alex." Clara's voice cut through the fog, sharp with concern that he blinked, and the cafe snapped back into focus. He was in the booth, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table. Leo was looking at him, his brow furrowed with worry. Clara was leaning forward, her face a mask of gentle alarm. "Alex, are you okay? You went somewhere else just now." He tried to force a smile, a pathetic, trembling thing. "Sorry," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Just lost in thought." But it was a lie. He hadn't been lost. He had been found by the ghost that never left his side. And now it was sitting at the table with them, an invisible guest, casting a long, cold shadow over the fragile warmth. He had just begun to feel. Clara didn't press him. Seeing the storm in his eyes, she performed a small act of quiet rescue. She simply nodded, her expression softening with an understanding that asked for no explanation, and gently steered the conversation back to Leo, asking him to describe the perfect spaceship in minute detail. The tension at the table slowly subsided, the ghost of the past retreating into the shadows as Leo's enthusiastic chatter about warp drives and asteroid fields filled the space. Alex felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost hurt. She had given him a lifeline without even knowing what ocean he was drowning in. As they prepared to leave, the bill paid and coats being gathered, it happened. Leo, eager to show Clara the magnificent sunflower one last time before they left, reached across the table with the unrestrained enthusiasm of a 10-year-old. His arm caught the edge of his now empty water glass. It tipped, wobbled for a heart-stopping second, and then crashed onto the table, sending a cascade of ice and water onto the floor and down the front of his jeans. Instantly, Alex's well-oiled crisis protocol engaged. His body tensed, a hot flush of embarrassment creeping up his neck. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry," he stammered, already fumbling in his pocket for cash to leave as a tip for the mess. His instinct was to apologize, minimize, and flee before the disruption could draw any more attention. He was ready to scoop Leo up and be gone in 30 seconds. But before he could even rise, Clara was in motion. She didn't flinch. She laughed. It was a soft, breezy sound completely at odds with Alex's frantic panic. She grabbed a thick stack of napkins from the dispenser and knelt beside Leo's chair, dabbing at his wet jeans. "Whoa, that's a superhero move if I've ever seen one," she said to him, her voice low and conspiratorial, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Leo, who had been on the verge of tears from embarrassment, looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You just washed away all the bad guys from the table," she whispered, giving him a quick wink. "Very sneaky. Very effective. The potential disaster, the public shame, the hurried and humiliating exit. Clara dismantled it all with a few words and a shared secret. She turned a spill into a game. She looked up at a passing waiter with a calm, easy smile and said, "So sorry. About this, could we possibly get a few more napkins?" There was no alarm, no fuss, just an unshakable, graceful calm. The walk home was quiet. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Leo was happily pushing his own chair for a stretch, the sunflower held aloft like a torch. The two acts of kindness played over and over in Alex's mind. The flower given to the boy, not the man. The spill treated as a game, not a catastrophe. It was too much. It was too pure. He had to understand that he stopped just before their apartment building, forcing himself to speak. "Clara," he started, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. She turned to him, her expression open and patient. "Why are you like this?" he asked, the question raw and vulnerable. "All of this with Leo. You're not scared. You're not awkward. It's like you," he trailed off, unable to find the words. "Why?" Clara's gaze softened. She looked from Alex's searching face to Leo, who was a few feet ahead, examining a beetle on the pavement. A gentle, knowing smile touched her lips. "My younger brother, Ben," she said quietly. "He had cerebral palsy. He was my best friend, my partner in crime, and my hero. I spent 18 years as his official wheelchair pusher, secret keeper, and fiercest defender." She finally looked back at Alex, and he saw a flicker of her own healed-over history in her eyes. "I don't see a wheelchair, Alex," she said, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I just see a great kid with a dad who loves him. It's a language I've been fluent in my whole life." When Alex and Leo stepped back into their apartment, the very air inside felt different. The oppressive, weighted silence that had greeted them that morning was gone, chased away by a current of light, hopeful energy that seemed to emanate from Leo himself. He was humming a tuneless, happy song as he maneuvered his chair into the living room, his precious sunflower held carefully in his lap. The space was the same, the worn couch, the sparse walls, but it no longer felt like a sanctuary of shared grief. It felt like a home waiting for a new chapter. "Dad, we need a vase," Leo announced, his voice filled with a new, authoritative importance. Alex blinked, then smiled. A vase? He hadn't used one in 6 years. He opened a kitchen cabinet, the one where forgotten things were kept, and after a moment of rummaging behind old mugs and mismatched Tupperware, he found it. A simple glass vase, coated in a thin layer of dust. He rinsed it carefully in the sink, the running water sounding like a fresh start. He filled it and placed it on the windowsill, where it would catch the morning light. Leo wheeled himself over, and with the intense concentration of a surgeon, he lowered the sunflower into the water. He fussed with its position, turning it until its bright, open face was aimed perfectly toward the room. He sat back, admiring his work, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. Then he looked up at Alex, his expression bright and earnest. "She gave it to me, Dad," he said, his voice soft but firm, with a quiet emphasis on the word me. The simple sentence landed in Alex's heart with the force of a revelation. Me. Not us. Not you. In that moment, Alex understood. For 6 years, he had defined his son by the tragedy that bound them together. Leo was the boy in the wheelchair, the fragile center of his father's guilt-ridden universe, the living, breathing reason for his penitence. His fierce love had been inextricably tangled with a fierce sense of responsibility, a lens of sorrow that colored everything. Clara had seen none of that. She hadn't seen a tragedy or a responsibility. She hadn't seen a symbol of a life derailed. She had looked at his son and seen a 10-year-old boy, a boy who liked rocket ships, a boy who deserved a flower, just because, later, as Alex tucked Leo into bed, the familiar nightly ritual felt sacred. He smoothed the blankets, but instead of his usual quick, efficient movements, he lingered. He sat on the edge of the bed and simply looked at his son's face on the pillow, at the way his eyelids fluttered as sleep began to take him. He was truly seeing him for the first time in a long, long time. He saw not the ghost of the accident, but the stubborn spark of life that had refused to be extinguished. He saw not what was lost, but the incredible, resilient, funny, and brilliant person who had survived. Leaving the room, Alex walked back into the living room. His gaze fell upon the windowsill, where the sunflower stood in its vase, its silhouette, framed by the gentle glow of a street lamp outside. It looked like a lone, hopeful soldier standing guard. He realized then that it wasn't just a flower, a beautiful but temporary gift. It was something more. The flower on the sill wasn't just a dying bloom. It was a seed. The seed that had been planted on that first day began to grow, tended by shared laughter and quiet understanding. The weeks that followed were a montage of firsts. There was the afternoon at the park, where the sun filtered through the leaves as Clara and Alex engaged in a ridiculous, breathless race, pushing Leo's chair down the path, his delighted laughter serving as the finish line. There was the evening Clara came over for dinner, filling their small, quiet kitchen with the scent of garlic and basil, the easy rhythm of them chopping vegetables side by side, feeling more natural than anything Alex had known in years. Most telling was the day she stayed to help with Leo's physical therapy. She didn't hover awkwardly or offer pity. She sat on the floor with him, turning the grueling, painful stretches into a game. Each agonizing leg lift was counted not with numbers, but with the names of Avengers, her cheerful voice a steady source of encouragement that transformed a dreaded chore into a shared mission. She was there for the sunshine, but she wasn't afraid of the storms. The true climax arrived on a quiet Tuesday night, long after Leo was asleep. The apartment was still, the only light coming from a single lamp that pooled a soft glow around the couch where they sat. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, with the safety and trust they had carefully built. Alex knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that he couldn't move forward without unburdening the past. The accident, he began, his voice barely a whisper. I've never told anyone the truth of it. Clara didn't speak. She simply turned to him, her presence a silent invitation to continue, and so he did. The words came out in a torrent, a 6-year dam of guilt finally breaking. He told her about the rain, the song on the radio, and the blinding, perfect joy on Anna's face. He confessed the unforgivable sin that had been his secret cross to bear. I looked away from the road. He choked out, the words tearing at his throat. Just for a second. I looked at her, and when I looked back, it was too late. It was my fault, Clara. It was my fault. The confession hung in the air, and with nothing left to hold back, his composure finally shattered. A quiet, wrenching sob escaped him, then another, the silent tears he'd swallowed for years finally streaming down his face. Clara didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, "It wasn't your fault." Instead, she did something more profound. She reached out and took his hand, her grip firm and grounding. She waited, letting the storm of his grief pass over. When his sobs subsided into ragged breaths, she spoke, her voice soft with her own remembered pain. The week before my brother Ben passed away, she said, I got so frustrated with him because it took him 20 minutes to get his shoes on. I was impatient. I sighed and told him to hurry up. Her voice cracked. It was the last real conversation we ever had. And for years, all I could think about was my sigh. How I wished I could take back that one, ugly, selfish sound. She squeezed his hand. Grief is a cruel architect. It builds a prison of guilt for us to live in and convinces us we deserve the sentence. He looked up at her, his vision blurred, and saw his own pain reflected in her eyes. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. In that moment of shared, imperfect humanity, an unbreakable bond was forged. He realized he wasn't trying to replant a garden that had been scorched to the earth. He was standing on new ground entirely, with a woman who understood that soil is made richer by the things that have decayed. He was building something new, a garden not of replacement, but of redemption. The late afternoon sun of a new season casts a golden, honeyed light across the park. On a wooden bench overlooking a small duck pond, a new constellation has formed. Leo sits nestled between Alex and Clara, his head resting sleepily on Clara's shoulder, his small hand held securely in hers. Alex's arm rests along the back of the bench behind them both, a quiet circle of protection and belonging. There is an easy peace here, a comfortable silence that feels a world away from the heavy, aching quiet that once defined their lives. As they sit, watching the light dance on the water, Alex's voice comes in, a soft and steady narration over the scene. I went on a date expecting to talk about movies and weather. I was looking for companionship, I suppose. A way to feel a little less alone. But what I found was something I never knew I needed. I found grace. It's funny how you think your life will be changed by huge, earth-shattering events. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's changed by the smallest, quietest decisions. The decision to kneel down instead of standing tall. The decision to see a little boy before you see his father. The decision to offer a single flower, not as a gift, but as a greeting. The scene gently fades from the park bench to the wall of their apartment's living room. The camera slowly zooms in on a simple, elegant frame. Inside, pressed and preserved behind the glass, is a single, large sunflower, its faded yellow a permanent, beautiful echo of a life-altering day. 1. Person's choice to look past the circumstance and see the person right in front of them had the power to rewrite our entire future. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that the biggest changes in our world don't always come from grand gestures or loud declarations. Sometimes, they come from the simple, silent act of seeing someone for exactly who they are. It wasn't a perfect, happy ending to a sad story. It was just a beautiful beginning.